Toraja Mello is weaving stories of Indonesia and trying to take it to the world so that they know beyond the stereotypical definition of Indonesia, which is batik, Bali, and coffee.
Welcome back to this week's episode of The Executives, the show where we navigate the intricate world of executive leadership, exploring strategies, insights, and personal stories of successful professionals shaping the global business landscape. I'm your host, Majid, and joining us today is Aparna. Aparna Saxena is a trailblazing social entrepreneur, impact angel investor, and advocate for sustainability and women empowerment. As the CEO of Toraja Mello and founder of Ahana, she empowers women led artisan communities in Indonesia through eco focused and scalable business models. Aparna is also the co founder of Riksh Impact Partners, championing plant based businesses and sustainable investments. She has won awards such as the UN PEPS Award. आदाब और आपका द एग्जीक्यूटिव्स की पॉडकास्ट में खुश आमदीद अपर्णा.
नमस्ते और आदाब. बहुत अच्छा लगा आपसे बात करके.
Likewise, I'm very honored to have you, but I try to do justice because you are very experienced. You have a lot of experience on your plate. So I try to do justice by summarizing your whole experience within a few lines. I hope I did justice, but we would love to understand more about who is actually Aparna Saxena.
Okay. So thank you, Majid. And I think you did justice. Yeah. I can say my experience equals to the number of mistakes I might have done to navigate this journey here. So, about me, I'm originally from Mumbai, India, and I have lived and worked in 4 countries across Asia, and Indonesia now being where I have been here now for 7 years. And I took over running of Torajo Mello in the middle of pandemic in 2020 June. Yeah. And since then, we've been in a journey of reiteration and reinvention where when I say reiteration, we have reinforced our focus on working with indigenous communities, right? And especially focused on the craft of backstrap loom weaving. So you see behind in my background. And then, of course, integrating sustainability. So, creating a sustainable supply chain because I come from that background, from logistics and also e-commerce. And that's what now Toraja Mello is about. So we are weaving stories of Indonesia and trying to take it to the world so that they know beyond the stereotypical definition of Indonesia, which is batik, Bali, and coffee. So, we want to take that conversation beyond. And then briefly on Ahana. So, Ahana is what I would say is Toraja Mello plus plus. So, with Toraja Mello, our focus is on backstrap loom weaving, right? And then working with indigenous artisans connected to that. But with Ahana, what we are trying to do is take that same mission and value beyond and work with similar minded businesses, communities, individual entrepreneurs, as long as they're looking at intersection and coming together of culture, environment, and social sustainability. So these are businesses that want to stand for something. They want to create great products and solutions that make a difference, right, rather than just creating one more item that feeds the mass consumerism that we see around us. So I think with both of these, I am actually sort of summarizing, or my life has sort of come a full circle with my personal values, which have been around projects and causes connected to environment, women, and overall education. So that's me extending a bit more on who I am and what I am doing currently. Yeah.
Mhm. I'm happy to have you here. But before we talk about the more serious sort of element, I would love to ask you a question. It's nothing to do with your work because you're from Mumbai. Mumbai is also famous for food. So, and now you're living in Jakarta, Indonesia. So, what would be the one food item that you could eat from Indonesia, not India, that is very Indonesian, and you could eat it every day and you would not get bored with it?
Okay, great question. And I think that food has kept me going. And that is basically tofu, which is called as tahu here, right? Because I am a vegan. So I didn't share this, but I'm a vegan. And tofu becomes a great source of protein and plus the taste. Yeah. So I think I really miss it when I'm traveling, when I'm away. and I can really survive on tofu every day in whatever form. It's a great replacement for paneer also. So I would say tofu. Yeah,
Mm.
without
I
getting bored
think
even for a single minute.
I think tofu is the safer option for people who also have lactose problems, right? Because I have a friend who's vegan and lactose has a lactose problem, so she cannot eat paneer. If she eats paneer, she gets sick. So tofu becomes like a very safe option. And also, like I saw tempeh, right? Tempeh.
Tempeh, exactly.
Uh,
So honestly, soybean based products, right? And then, so you're right. For anyone who's having lactose intolerant, even if they're not vegan, um, soybean based products, which is tofu, tempeh, and then, soy milk for those who like, are excellent, alternatives, and they do not compromise on the nutrition. Yeah. So you still get
mm,
the nutritive protein and everything. So, yeah. And the interesting thing about tofu is it can absorb the taste of whatever curry you put it in. So I think that
mm,
comes in as a great plus. Yeah, yeah.
mm. I mean, I didn't realize it that we have so many types of tofu. So I went to this Asian store here, and then I saw a whole fridge filled with tofu because I was used to seeing only two or three types of tofu. And then I realized, and I started experimenting. It took me literally 2 months or 3 months to basically test every single variety of them, and it was different. All of them tasted very different, and you had to handle them a different way. Because I remember I got this forgot the name,
Silken
but
tofu.
I silken tofu, yeah, silken
Yes,
tofu. And it was so hard to handle. It was just like everything just like went.
exactly. It's so delicate. It's literally like caramel custard, So you have to be very careful with the consistency. Exactly. You're right.
Mhm. No, but that's good. That's good. That's a good suggestion. I mean, if anyone of the listeners is vegan, you have to try one Indonesian food. They have a lot of options. Also, Indian food has a lot of vegan options, right? So
Indeed,
dals,
indeed.
lentils, dal, vegetables. I mean, that's what I say. Like whenever I want to eat lentils, I have my friends who are like from India, and they are like 100% vegan, and I go to them, hey, can you make me this dal? And I cannot compete with them. So,
Lovely,
and then
lovely.
other friends who eat meat, they are like, "Hey, Majid, you bet cook better meat. Like, can we come?" I'm like, "Sure." So it's like,
Interesting.
but
Yeah. And in fact, the dish that I love the most of tofu, might not be the most healthiest, but it's called as tahu isi, and it's basically tofu that is dipped into a batter. So here they don't use besan as we do, right, which is chickpea flour, but here they will use normal flour. And so it's basically that tofu, but inside the tofu they've made, space to put in vegetables and chilies. So it'll be, different vegetables like cabbage, and it'll be bean sprouts or whatever. And then it's dipped and, it's fried, and then you have it with, bird's eye chili. And I love hot and spicy. So that's literally my go to comfort food. Of course, I don't overindulge because it is fried, but I strongly recommend that to anyone who comes to Indonesia. You've got to try it once. And there are non spicy versions too, right? Like without the chili. So, yes.
mm. And if it's less spicy, you can always put some sambal or like on top of it, right?
Indeed, exactly, which I always do. So, yes.
Oh, cool. But no, that's interesting. I mean, we can always talk a long time for food because food is something I think that connects people, also different cultures, and also shows the diversity across different countries. For example, we have the same tofu in Indonesia, we have the same tofu in Germany, and the way both the countries will cook would be very different because of the spices, the culture, and so on. But today we are sitting together to discuss something more sort of serious and something more important, which is the empowering communities and driving impact. What are the lessons in leadership, sustainability, and social innovation? So we would love to start because you already explained what is Toraja Mello, and I realized that you are an engineer. You are from an engineering background. So can you share with us your journey from engineering towards management and then towards leading meaningful initiatives across various industries? And you mentioned you also lived across four countries. So can you highlight that for us?
Thanks for the question. Actually, it's been a very interesting journey, and I'll be very honest. I never knew that I would land up here, right? So you never envision. And again, when you study to be an engineer, you do have sometimes very stereotypical paths charted out for you, right? Though I have never been anything stereotypical, I've always been, going against the tide. But yes, I'm a mechanical engineer, and then in the final year, think on advice of my one of the like advisors who was also the head of the mechanical engineering department, he felt that I should combine that with applications rather than just sticking with pure engineering. And that's when I decided to go for my MBA in operations. So I did my MBA in manufacturing and operations, and both my internships were in proper manufacturing plants, right? One was Tata and Mahindra, right? And then and then through campus itself, yeah, I was lucky while I was doing my MBA that I got selected to join DHL in logistics. So that was my first career out of campus, and in I joined the operations team, and it was very interesting journey, like 8 roles in 11 years, and I was amongst the first ones to move from operations to sales, right? And also move cities. So, like a typical Mumbaiker, I'm sure you've heard the stereotype, moving to Delhi to be part of a global sales team, again in manufacturing sector. And then, work got me to Singapore in a regional role, right? Where from sales, I moved to after sales. And then I moved to a global role in program management with another business unit, and then to e-commerce part, right? So literally it was within the space of e-commerce and logistics, but I navigated a lot of different roles. As I said, 8 roles in 11 years, and global, regional, and country leadership. Lot of learnings, lot of lessons, and I think it was good to see that where there were not so many women, also the number of women in these spaces also started to increase, even though slowly. And then, as again, I would call it serendipity, but I actually left DHL to become an entrepreneur in Singapore. And that was, by that time I had turned vegan, so it was a vegan snacks business, and I was a partner with a friend. Yeah, and I'm doing this because it really didn't go well. So the first experience of entrepreneurship was a very big lesson on trust, and understanding a friend versus a business partner is different. Lot of lessons there, but it also told me what my values were. And I always like to combine purpose with business, right? So, and I think that told me that. So after that experience, I actually exited the business, and I could have gone back to DHL, right? Or I could have gone back to corporate, but I actually took a pause, and I had an opportunity to first volunteer and then become COO of this organization called Angels of Impact in Singapore, that was doing impact advisory and trade finance and support for women run impact businesses across ASEAN region. And honestly, that's where I got exposed to Toraja Mello, because it was one of the businesses they were advising and supporting. So that's how I met the founder way back in 2016 in Singapore. And then again, as fate would have it, I ended up moving to Jakarta, where their headquarters are, to run the last mile logistics for Lazada, which is an Alibaba company. Yeah, and as the last mile logistics head. And that was a very interesting journey, of course, a lot of learnings working in this country. But at the same time, when I moved, since I had already understood my hooks that I have told you, I actually reached out to the founder and I said, listen, I'm here and I'd love to contribute in my free time, which by the way, Majid, I had hardly. We used to have like 14 to 16-hour days, but still, I wanted to be involved in something beyond work. And she grabbed at it, right? And then I ended up becoming their advisor for, strategic business over the next 2 years while I was with Lazada. Again, I like challenges. So I finished 2 years in Lazada, left Lazada to actually join an edutech in Vietnam. So I was there. That was July 2019. Yeah. And I spent about 6 months there. And then I came back here in Jan 2020, right, to see if that edutech could be introduced into Indonesia. But we all know what started happening in Jan 2020. I was also realizing that I was possibly not a fit for them. Yeah. I think the way I work and the way for me values matter, and they were all extremely smart people, but I wouldn't give them top points on EQ. So anyway, while that was happening, actually the founder reached out and she literally told me, Aparna, take over. And I was taken aback because, by the way, by that time, Majid, this was my third exposure to running something, right, as part of the leadership would have been. And for the first time in my life, I was a bit hesitant. I said, listen, I've done mostly international roles. This is totally local. And you're asking me, a foreigner, to run this. And but she was relentless. She said, I know you for 3 years. I trust you. I haven't found anyone. And by that time, this organization had been around for 12 years already. Yeah. She was relentless, Majid. She every week she would be like, "When are you taking over? When are you taking over?" And finally, I gave in. Yeah, and I said, "Okay, let's go for it." Aparna, you like challenges, but I did ask her two questions, which I think are extremely important, and I'd like to give this to anyone who's looking at entrepreneurship or looking to get in people. Is I basically asked her, because she was a single founder. Yeah, is that one? Do you trust me? And second is, are you okay if I'll run this differently than you have been? And for her, both of the answers were very, very vocal and joyous. Yes, she said, of course, because if you have to do what I've been doing, what's the whole point? And I think that has what made me continue so far, right? I'm actually finishing my fourth year. I will in June. And that level of trust, where I can sum it in two phrases that we can say. So for her, it was let's go and let go. So let's go in terms of me leading in it, and for her to let go and let me, lead it. And that's been the journey, right? Surviving through pandemic, it was very tough, and even now, right, we are catching up on things. So that's been my journey. So I think I'm a seeker of challenges and a student for life, and I'm forever trying to figure out how we can make things better through
Mm.
business with a purpose.
You mentioned a lot of good points. For example, I can immediately connect. For example, you mentioned about leaders having EQ, and then you also mentioned like constantly you were saying about that you have values, correct? But values come because something inspires you, right? So, for example, the values I have, I got them for some different reasons. For example, one of my biggest values is if I'm ever a leader, I want to make sure that the people who are working with me are treated as human beings. And and to be very frank, shit happens. There will be days where I don't want to work, for I'm sick or I'm having a headache or I need to run errands, like go to the bank. Now, bank's not my personal secretary that they would be open at 12 in the night. They would be open during the working hours, which is 9 to 4 or 8 to 5, whatever the working hours are. So I need to treat my people with respect and also give them the liberty that, hey, if you want to meet a doctor, if you want to go somewhere, just go. Let the people who are actually working with you, let them know, so the work doesn't get affected. That people are like not messaging you and then confused. Oh no, this person didn't tell me, or put a status that I'm out of office from this time to this time. So would love to understand what was the inspiration for you actually to focus on impact driven businesses and sustainability, because from mechanical engineering towards doing something very specific.
A good one, yeah. So I think first of all is over a period of time, and I will also say at a very young age, I could relate to what mattered to me, and I do owe it to my father, and then of course my mother's support for the exposure and the parenting I got, which was very open, very feminist, right? An equal household. So as a female, I was never discriminated against at home. There was never like, you are a girl, so you can't do this. So therefore, the concepts of, I would say, social justice, equality, and then caring for environment, because I grew up in a very green township, were embedded. And I was like that. And I think, I don't know, whatever people say, maybe the youngest child is like this, but I've always been very firm. With years, of course, I wouldn't say the firmness is gone, but how you impose that firmness, you navigate that, right? um, so I think those values were always there, and I cared about environment. I cared about, reducing the amount of plastics and the waste, and women needed equal standing, so that was there. And even when I was working, yeah, I was in, and while I was studying too, I would be involved in projects related to that, either spearheading them or contributing. But they were always there as a plus, as an attachment. What impact entrepreneurship allows me, Majid, is the fact that I can integrate those values and bring them in the forefront. So they become the driver, they become the main vocation rather than what you do in your free time. And I think that takes a period of time for you to understand. I think for some people it happens much earlier, they figure it. But for me, I have to say, initially it was about economic independence, right? I think the first thing I have to tell you is, for every person, irrespective of gender, after your education you have to have your economic independence, which is via job or whatever, for you to be able to exercise your decisions, right? Because if you are dependent on your living for someone, then you do not have that freedom to exercise your choices. So I think that is something that got embedded, right? I've studied on loans and paid those loans, come from a very middle class background. And so with that economic independence, then you start exercising your time and your efforts and your money in those places. And this movement towards leading an impact organization also came in from the fact that I've been exposed to development sector in some way, so non-profits, etc., and also very very capitalistic startups, you see. And for me it became very clear, and again, this is my belief, but I do believe this is for everybody's future, is that impact businesses are the future of business. What does that mean is, we do not operate in isolation from the environment, society, everything, right? We are taking. So if we are taking, we have to be mindful of what are we giving, and if we are giving off negative, if we are doing more extractive stuff, then how are we minimizing? And honestly, every business is that, right? No business operates in isolation. Only thing is, most businesses are able to get away with a strong imbalance of taking versus giving, right? Or balancing, rather, I would say, right? I wouldn't say giving, I would say balancing your, negative. And they are able to get away with it because
Mm.
they are run by people in positions of power and network and money. Okay. So for me, I just realized that I would like to be involved, and as I grow older and hopefully wiser, I would like to contribute via, creation of business and opportunities where, yes, we are making money, but we are making money for the stakeholders across the value chain we are involved in, and not just the shareholders. It's not just the investors and the proprietors that should grow and prosper, but people who are involved with us, and how can we distribute that more effectively. So again, I'm not saying that where I'm not endorsing one theory versus the other, right? Like the capitalist, communist, whatever. I would like to say this is about impact entrepreneurship, and it's about being aware of creating business value but not forgetting social and impact value, and balancing that out, that overall the ecosystem thrives. Because we don't have time, honestly. And um, and I would say we don't have time. I will not say save the earth, because the earth will survive humans, right? It's the humans who will not survive if we go at this rate. Yeah. And hence, for our own, sustenance and the sustenance of our progeny, we need to now get conscious about what are the steps we should undertake. And that's where I would like to be part of that solution. So for me, it ties down to my personal value of making a difference. So I like to be in places where anything through my actions can create positive impact or leave things better, is where I'd like to contribute. And the moment things will become standard, right, where I believe I am not delivering value, I'm not adding anymore, it's gone beyond me, then I'd like to go and seek another challenge and be able to contribute. So that's how, the whole story comes together for me,
Mm.
Majid.
And because you kept mentioning about you want to leave a better world, right? So would love to talk about, because in Trajamelo and also Ahana, you are empowering women led artisan communities, right? So how do you actually do that, if it's not a trade secret, because we have to also talk about the people who are actually building the stuff, right? So
Yeah,
how do you support them, for example? Because at the end of the day, it's one Trajamelo or one startup Ahana
yeah.
versus I don't know, maybe thousands of artisans who are actually creating amazing craft, which is sometimes sadly also is lost because there is no one else who promotes it or who takes it over, right?
Indeed. Indeed. So, first of all, we cannot do this alone. Yeah. So, again, I would say great question, Majid. You're asking all the right ones. Is the fact that we cannot do this alone. And for us, we are one amongst the many that need to come together. It's just that we are strong believers in the power of the collective. What I have seen is if we try to fight a fight individually, as a renegade and a soul ranger, there's only so much you can do. You'll be limited by your network and the power around you. But the moment you come together, right, there's something you can offer, there's something someone else can offer, and how you come together on a common ground towards achieving collective goals is what will make a difference, because that's how the mainstream has operated, right? So that's what we'd like to achieve, and I'll be very honest to admit we are not there yet. There are a lot of challenges, right? And we also know the challenges we face is what others like us face, and that's where we'd like to work on this together, right? Which is why Ahana, by the way, is not limited to Indonesia. We are seated in Indonesia, but we want to stand for the global south, and we will love to partner with businesses as long as they're aligned with our values for for scaling and representing what the global south can stand for, right? Okay. So essentially I think that is the point. Also, the artisans and the businesses and the communities we represent, right, they have the same challenge. They cannot do this alone. Some of them are able to scale to a certain level because they received a certain support at certain point in time, or they had the right tools and everything working for them, but they are not able to go beyond a certain level, right? I think any business that has scaled has always scaled because of various factors coming in place, and
Hmm.
definitely there is a strong network effect and collaboration at play, right? Whether people admit or not. Okay. So I think for us is and that's one of the reasons why I founded Ahana, because I knew this is what I could do with Toraja Mello, right? By design, Toraja Mello can only go to a certain level. Ahana gives that platform to businesses like Toraja Mello to go beyond. And also, Ahana will not succeed if we do not have more and more partners, networks, people like yourselves who help us communicate about our work, our stories, investors, and take this to the next level. Because otherwise, we'll always be pitted against the ones who have more power and more funding,
Hmm.
essentially.
True.
So I think that's what we are able to do, and we aim to do. So I will say we are just starting. Yeah, long way to go.
Hmm. No, that's, I mean, not only the companies that have funding, but also the corporates, right? I mean, fighting against the bigger corporations who are selling arts and craft, who have much more, who make billions and billions. It's very hard for a startup to compete against them, right? So I mean, it's very important that we try to get the word out, and we also try to work together. And also I just realized, because I've met many corporates, sometimes corporates don't also have an understanding how they can work with startups to actually support these startups, because they are thinking in their own way, that they are a corporate, they have their own processes and so on, and they also partner with younger, with smaller startups and organizations and non-profits and so on, to actually help them accelerate. Because you never know, because things might change and businesses do evolve, right? So at the end of the day, I think it is important that partnerships happen. It is important that you have a dialogue with people. It is important that people actually listen and communicate with each other, right? But also, this is not one of the easiest businesses. I mean, the easiest business right now, in my opinion, is software. Build a software, sell the software, you get a few customers, recurring income, and then at the end of the day, there will be a big company that might come and acquire you. This has more logistics. This has more, you need to make sure that you have enough supply for demand. You need to make sure that you're getting a new design every now and then. It's not the same thing being sold again and again, so it becomes more complicated as compared to a traditional software business. So would love to understand what have been the challenges that you have actually noticed during the journey of Toraja Mello, as well as a founder, as a startup CEO.
Interestingly, while you were sharing, you actually answered the question you've asked me, but I will, in a way, because so it is. So first is, the market is always a challenge, getting and finding the right market, right? Who are your target customers? That always. So you need the team, you need the thinking, you need that understanding that, which is the right market. But it ties down very closely to building the supply chain, and that was always a challenge with Toraja Mello, which we would continue to figure out, because we're working with artisans, and they will not think the way you would think when you're working with a factory or a production facility, right? So navigating that and figuring out your sourcing challenges, your raw material challenges, your production planning, all that is very critical. And also knowing what is it that you can offer, right? So managing customer expectations, and then figuring out what is it that you can do. So I think these are very real challenges which are very day to day, and that then tells us what do we play where. What do I mean by that is, for example, Toraja Mello has its fashion line, right? You can see this thing behind me, apparel, right? Now, a piece of clothing will take a larger amount of weaving, right? So we need to know how much of it can we bring forward, right? Do I have the capacity, capability to bring out line after line, right, following the seasons, which again goes against our value, because we want to promote slow lifestyle, right? So I shouldn't be getting season out of season again, because I'm pushing consumerism by just saying, oh yeah, these are well made and natural, but still it is more. So I think understanding that, where will I take this fashion line, and then where do I have to accept that, okay, we are no more just a fashion business, but making it a lifestyle business, wherein I can then make more smaller goods, accessories, wherein from one piece of weaving you can make more. So your potential to scale is better. To then knowing where do I put in Ahana, wherein whatever limitations of Toraja Mello that comes from sourcing, of weaving and everything, which we will not compromise on, right? We'll not do automation, we'll not use different methods of weaving. With Ahana, I'm able to sort of address that, because I work then with a wider group of partners who bring in different SKUs, different channels, right? So right from
Mm.
personal care to home and living, etc. So I think the challenges are very real and they remain. So from raw material production, right targeting, the marketing cost, and the thing is, and daily I'm trying to hack it, and what I'm trying to do is keep myself grounded on the first principles of business, because as you rightfully pointed out, a software business is very easy, comparatively easy to scale, right? You can put in all those metrics in, and you're not relying on infrastructure, etc. But the kind of business I'm in, it requires a certain level of capital and assets, etc., and planning. So, keeping that in view, I'm working to operate on first principles of business, minimizing the cost smartly without compromising quality, and keeping on seeking smarter business opportunities, and finding where our ideal customer lies, which might not always be in the country we are based in, right? So this is something that we are continuously hacking, and I'm navigating. And this is what essentially I'd like to share. And that's why, Majid, I told you Ahana is not just limited to Indonesia, right? Which is
Mm.
why,
Mm.
if there are businesses that are aligned with us on value, we're happy to work with them, collaborate, and access market together. Already started working with a business in India. Discussions with Philippines and Vietnam are on. Thailand is on. So, which means we are also trying to get this collective together, which also makes smarter business sense, because my supply chain is not dependent on certain players.
Mm.
So that's how I'm essentially learning to navigate this with my team.
Mm. No, that's brilliant. I mean, it's not an easy business. I mean, I've consulted a few e-commerce businesses, and I've realized that it's not easy. E-commerce is pretty hard. I mean, and if you're like, I remember I had a client. They were from marble in industry, and they were getting marble from India, Pakistan, and so on. And if one of the lots was destroyed, right, they couldn't do anything. It was just money wasted, like directly. And then they found a creative way. They started like selling it to a local artist who would basically make arts with the broken pieces of marble. But it was for them, they were still bearing loss. So it was this young startup, so but at the end, so things like that also happen. And then the second problem, customers are waiting. Hey, when will we get our marble? Because we are waiting for you to give us our marble so we can finish building our house, so we can live there. But yes, now the whole logistics is taking more time and so on. But now moving more towards like a success, would love to understand like one story that you think is a huge success of Ahana or Turaja Mello, for example, that you take a lot of pride in. You're like, you know what, this is something I'm super proud about. Like I would love to understand like about one or two women-led artisans, for example, communities or something.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So I think I still maintain we have a long way to go, but I can definitely talk about one of our biggest projects that, I mean, thanks to the kindness of the customer, it was Body Shop Indonesia, that we did, and that time Ahana was in process of being birthed, but was not yet fully born, right? And I think that experience with Body Shop further reiterated why I needed a Ahana too, is where with Body Shop we did a project of creating sustainable packaging, right? So boxes and pouches in which they would house their premium collection, and this was more than 5,000 pieces, okay, right, and which required naturally dyed weaving from particular community, right? So the motif belongs to them. The branding colors had to meet Body Shop's brand colors. Now achieving that with natural dye, oh my god, it was the amongst the worst nightmare. But I think Body Shop understood the challenges and the effort, right, we put in, and it did get delayed, but they stayed true with us because the chairperson herself understands the power of collective and community, and we delivered the project, and it was actually released in last year's Ramadan, during that, because the colors are green, if you look at Body Shop colors, and that there were two communities that strongly contributed, but there were also our production partners, who created these boxes, and each of them stand for something. So I think this was the biggest challenge in terms of putting this together, but also the biggest success because we were able to deliver, and it now serves as a good benchmark and a sign of credibility that we can do this at scale, right? And now with Ahana, I know I can deliver now because I have more partners and I understand their capabilities, right? Much better.
Mhm.
So I think I would call that the Body Shop one, and the other is I would call our B Corp and our Forum Fair Trade certification, which are not certifications that get dished out, because for us at Ajamello and Ahana, walking the talk is important, right? I can tell you whatever, but if I'm not incorporating it in my own way of being an operating business, then it's
Mhm.
not done. So I think going through that B Corp certification, which was like a huge journey, and this was during the pandemic, by the way, right? So essentially going deep into ESG, right, and what we were doing and what we had to do right and how we could make things better, and with a very lean team, it was me and some interns at that stage, and achieving that and gaining that certification has been a great sign of confidence and also commitment, because now we know we walk the talk, and now actually I'm known to be super strict and quite knuckle headed, because we also want to take that to our partners and other vendors and say that, hey, you need to look at your own processes and impact also. So I would like to share about these two, uh, one on business, one on impact, and how they are intertwined, because by the way, Body Shop Indonesia is also B Corp certified. So, it was us two B Corps coming together and delivering this, product. And that's been an amazing and a great learning journey. Yeah.
Mhm. No, that's really good, and congratulations on that. But there is, I see now, being sustainable, financially sustainable, and socially impactful. They sound very like two crossroads, like they don't sound that it's one single street. So how do you ensure that businesses with the purpose actually remain both financially stable and socially impactful? Because I have a feeling it's not that easy, right? I mean, Body Shop is a big corporate, so they know how hard it is. That's why they asked you, and would love to understand what how do you ensure? Because I'm sure there are other founders sitting in other countries as well who are either struggling to be financially sustainable or who are trying to be socially impactful, but are, so how do you ensure both?
Okay. So again, great questions. Majid, you're asking all the right ones. So first of all, I would say is it's same thing in any business, by the way, right? And what do I mean when I say that is that if you go on either side thinking that I think the business can only sustain if I have to cut corners and this, then you end up on one side. And similarly, when you talk about impact, if you think impact can be done without keeping in mind the fundamentals of business, you're again landing up on the wrong side, right? And this is where I want to say is I'm talking about impact business. The business part comes in. I'm not talking about charity, wherein you're always depending on somebody externally to fund you. And also, I'm not talking about out and out capitalism, where it's always at cost of some people. Yeah, it's just that we tend to neglect it. We don't tend to value that, but it's always at a cost. Now, when we try to do impact businesses, it's about balancing the two. Your aim is to make profit. We have to make profit. That's why a business exists. But can you make that profit long term sustainable by smarter business decisions, looking at your supply chains, and maybe reduce the margin a bit for yourself by sharing it with your stakeholders? Because, by the way, that creates long term resilience,
Mm,
right? And honestly, you're reducing your risk. That's what people don't understand. Risk is a key part of finance, right? So when you are de-risking your business by over a period figuring out the right partners to work with and not having crazy lofty goals that I want to grow this way, right? Because you grow this way, you can also fall this way, right? One thing goes wrong, but what if you're growing but it's flatter but it's long term? And honestly, if you look back at businesses, that's how businesses that have lasted for 100 years have lasted, is because they're constantly looking at what is relevant, what do they need to relook, but without compromising their core values, right? Any business that refuses to do that, be it impact or whatever, does not survive. So I agree with you, it is tougher for us because what we essentially lack, Majid, I'll tell you, is we lack the network and the power, right? Okay. But once we gain that in certain way, how we use that network and power to create an ecosystem rather than an individualistic approach is what will matter in long term, sustainable ways, right? So that's how I would say it is tough, I agree. And I wish, there's always a wish list. I wish, I had rich parents or whatever, or some, great donor who's like, take this money and do what you want, right? But if I sort of put my head down and look at how do I keep my costs low, right? Minimize the cost and look at maximizing value but without compromising quality. So that's where we are a bit, different, and trying to be mindful that we are not being oppressive, right? We are not taking advantage of any of our stakeholders, because there's only so much you can get away with this, right? I mean, sooner or later, the time comes up. So that's what I would say. And I think, and that is what, when I mentor and give feedback, is impact entrepreneurs have to think like entrepreneurs and businesses. The moment they think, okay, I'll just keep, taking grant funding and donor this, it will not last. So we'll have to look at the sustainability of our business, which can often mean maybe collaboration helps. That's why for Ahana, collaboration is the key. I can't do this alone.
mm,
Yeah. And at the same time, do not compromise on quality and values, because then how are you different from any other business, right? You will lose your differentiation. So I think being mindful of that as a business is what matters. And I think it's just trying to figure smart business practices and not falling victim to all these vanity metrics and valuations, etc., but just look at minimize your cost, maximize the value for the customer and your supply chain, and see what you can let go. Right, for me, one of the toughest ones is the moment we go to a tough period, the first person that doesn't get money is me, and I've not been paying myself. I mean, it is what it is, but if I can't sustain my team and my supply chain, and I take away a lofty salary, I think that's the stupidest thing any founder can do. So I think it's even these kind of decision making that you have to keep on checking till you nail it step by step. So sorry, a very long-winded, answer or sharing, but I do want to reiterate that it finally comes down
Mm.
to fundamentals of business. That's it. Yeah.
No, but I mean that's true, right? At the end of the day, because at one point, for example, I know grants change. Grants get closed, grants get cancelled, and so on. So why not try to be independent? Like, why not try to generate your own income that you don't have to knock someone's door? Hey, you know what? Can you give me some money again? Instead, why not? Hey, you want to buy our product? I actually like the businesses which are trying to do something like make money. I mean, the smaller business as well. I understand that yes, sometimes you need to get your feet off the ground. That's fine. That's why grants are there. But at the end of the day, you are trying to run a business. You are trying to help the economy. You are trying to hire people. You are trying to support the local ecosystem and so on. So why not try to actually do it in a way where you don't need to worry about, hey, you know what? I just have funding for 6 months, but seventh month, I don't know what happens because we are not thinking about sustainability. We are thinking about just making an impact. So impact, now the highway has suddenly merged together, because it is important, right? Now I know you actually also run a angel investment firm, right? The Vriksh Impact Partners. It's normally a different kind of uh, investment firm which is focused primarily on plant-based businesses. So firstly, can you quickly explain to us what do you mean, like for people to understand what are we talking about here?
Vriksha has an interesting story. If you go to our website, you will see the blogs from the original three founders. Each of us had our co-founders. In each of us had our reasons. I think it just started with the learning that, and this was during pandemic, by the way. It was essentially seeded, germinated, everything took birth during the pandemic time, and I think it just came together with the fact that we wanted to put whatever money we had, right? Whatever savings, something we had, where our mouth is, right? So if I talk about sustainability, and the three of us are plant based, vegan for a while. So what do we do if we have certain surplus? So do you want to just put it in something, some structured investment plan, or you want to try and put it somewhere where you think it can make a difference? So I think it just came from that. Each of us had our reasons, and so it started as that, and we've done one investment. After that, we actually took a step back to reflect also, because we operate more like a syndicate, and we're angel, we're not some registered institutional investor. Is also we realized that a lot of these businesses, they lack core advisory mentoring on how to run the business, right? So while the idea might be great, but if your fundamentals are not, so that's when we in that journey have now pivoted to not just putting the money. So money is one part, you can raise, but do you have the right structures, process, team in place to scale? Because I've personally faced that challenge in Ahana, right? I don't still have that team, right? um, so I think that's what it has now come to. And what Vriksh Impact does is, so starting with plant based, and what plant based means essentially is, we do not want to support businesses that leverage on essentially giving harm to any sentient beings, right? That's what, right? So so now what Vriksh has become is an impact advisory and investment, and where we'd like to support both profit, for profit or non-profits, in the field of climate, plant-based, gender equality, and see from the experience that me and my co-founder have gathered, whether we can help them through our network, through our knowledge, right? So we are registered in India, but my co-founder, she's actually based in London. So we are happy to support anyone and everyone as long as they fit the thesis. So we are really looking for early stage, because we don't have that capability to help larger scale ones, and they can afford others. So that's what now Vriksh has become. And Vriksh, literally, Vriksh means tree in Sanskrit. So that's why we call ourselves Vriksh Impact, because we'd like to take these seeds and help them grow into a tree if we can, through our support and knowledge. So that's what we do now. So again, whatever free time we have, me and my co-founder, we try to devote it to these kind of projects. And initially our focus was India, but we realized, I think, the your nationality or your country of birth should not limit. So now we are actually open wherever, if we feel we can offer value and there is a fit, we'll be happy to support. And largely it's done pro bono till it's a stage where maybe we can have a stake or some retainer. Yeah, so that's how we are doing
Mm.
Riksh.
So that's cool. I mean, it's also important, right? There are sometimes startups who have a product market fit, but they don't know how they can focus on more sustainability or more, for example, how if they can integrate ESG into their system or no. And which brings me to my question. Something very interesting, because I was on a like I have been asking this question to normal people who are not working in sustainability, not working in the same domain as you. Like, how do you ensure that you are living a sustainable life? And then the answers I got were like, I don't know, I don't use the plastic they give in the shopping mall and so on. I'm like, but what else can you do? And they were like, I don't know. And people are confused. Like, I'm talking about normal people who are doing jobs in IT and so on. They are not experts in sustainability, right? So, and then I said, you know what? I have someone coming who's working in this space, who's basically supporting communities. Why not throw the question towards Aparna and ask her that how can people who are, let's say, not investors, not like, like who are normal working people, which is majority of the world, like how can they actually bring sustainability into their life, what do you think, how can they incorporate into their work, and how can they incorporate into their life to make this also like a long term, that you mentioned that the planet needs to live long.
I'm so glad you asked, because this is a consistent challenge each of us will face, right? And sometimes I'll honestly tell you is we just have to make a start, right? And what I also want to say is I'm giving the answer before I go into breaking it down is, sustainability or impact creation is not doing everything with perfection, but it's actually a bunch of people trying to do good things imperfectly. That
Mm.
has more impact. So to the ones who are actually reducing plastic, applaud them, great first step. The other is exercise your right of being a conscious consumer. Exercise that right and responsibility, start demanding better made product, be it what you put inside your body or outside on you, right? The fact that if a consumer demands better, then businesses also have to give you better. What has happened with very rampant market economy and over consumerism is, first of all, let's understand it's a very new concept. What people don't realize is it's about 70, 80 years old. It came in post the depression in the US and the industrial revolution, fed onto it, wherein we started wanting more versus what we needed. There's a big difference between wanting something and needing something. We'll want to have everything, right? How much do you need? How much do you consume? And you will also see, Majid, this is a very urban behavior. If you, the moment you go to rural areas, and this is across the globe, the rural people will, it's not like they're all poor, right? I think that's again a stereotype to remove. They live in cohesion, they thrive because they live a largely symbiotic relationship. They know the difference between want and need, and they are able to come to terms with it, right? And they're able to live off it, and they're able to live better lives, right? For example, when we had largely agrarian economies, right? So you farmed and then you fed yourselves and then you sold the surplus. Now we just create for the surplus, and for our own needs we go and buy from the market, plastic packaged. You get it? So giving all this, putting it together is, start with something small. So hey, the ones reducing plastic, great, but the other is, please exercise your choice of consumer. Start looking at how it is made, where it is made. Do you want to be part of a supply chain which is oppressing certain countries, people from certain countries and economies which are largely in the global south, and it's the countries where you and I belong to, right, originally, where our people are not paid fair, not treated fair, but the products are then marked up more than 100, sometimes thousands of times, and it goes on to the pocket of that large corporation. So I think
Mm.
exercise and then being mindful, need versus want. I want 50 dresses, but do I need 50 dresses? Do I even wear them? It's been proven, by the way, Majid, that largely an individual only uses about 15%, up to 15% max of their wardrobe. So we buy, and then later you realize, shit, because you will realize as a human behavior, you go to what you're comfortable with, which is this smaller collection. It's only, I think, the ones whose job is to show might be forced to go beyond. So, which means I think it's again stepping back and thinking. That's what I say, whenever anyone wants to buy anything, right? And that's why I hate malls is, wanting a need. Do I want this or is it a need? The moment you know it's a want, hold back. Let me wait. Let me see if this desire remains. And you will mostly realize in a day or two that desire to get that thing will go away because you will get busy with something else. But if it is a real need, you need it for certain thing in your life, right? Like, for example, it's a food item, it's a cookware, it's a clothing you need for a specific occasion, office, then you will go back and get it. Yeah. So, and I would also say for every want that you fulfill, try to reduce some other want, right? And route it, correctly. I think this is a sustainable behavior. And honestly, this is not new. Our grandparents used to live that life. Yeah. And it's not that they weren't rich people or well off people in their times. I think it's just that we need to be start getting conscious, of what's, happening. And I agree, it's very tough in this current times of overconsumption, like media, right? We have shorter memories, we want instant gratification, we see somebody having it, it creates the FOMO, fear of missing out, and we want that. So I think it's also about being mindful that what I'm giving my attention to, what I'm succumbing to. And if you have to buy right, buy from somebody local, buy from somebody who can tell you where it is made, how it is made, right? So that you
Mm.
also form that connection and it lasts longer. And there are businesses doing that, right? I mean, Patagonia is one of the brands I really respect for walking that talk. So if you have to buy from the right brands.
Mm.
Yeah.
No, that's, I mean, that's good advice for the people who are actually, who want to do something sustainable. I mean, big brands are also trying, right? At the end of the day, they are trying. And like, I remember one of my friends was like, no, I'm just going to boycott everyone who's not sustainable. I'm like, what will it do? I mean, you cannot just like wake up in the morning and say, you know what, I don't buy from XYZ brand anymore. Because, but I've been buying for the last 20 years. I'm like, you don't even give them an opportunity to make the switch. You need to remember they have huge processes, they need to adapt, they need to train their people. So it's also a lot of cost that needs to go in. I'm like, if you stop buying from these brands as well, then what happens, the repercussion might be the people who are actually working in the companies, like I'm not talking about the C level, but I'm talking about individual people, they lose their job. So what you tried to do, you basically caused a misfire, and you, because of your decision, someone else ended up losing a job. So I would say yes, we should buy from, be more conscious about deciding, but also don't just like make rash decisions, right? It's also important that we don't just like, you know what, I'm not going to do this anymore. But what you mentioned about need and want, I think that's one of the most important things that you can do. That's one of the most important things. Do I really need this, or is it something, yeah, I can live without it? If you're able to answer that question, I think you're already on a very good pattern. And a lot of times people are like, even myself, I'm sometimes like, I do want this, but I don't really need this, but I would still like to have it. So, it's still like I'm trying to train my mind that, hey, you know what, let's slowly get into the premise of like sustainability. And it takes time. We are human beings at the end of the day. We need to change our like normal activities and normal, what how we process things, and also it's a learning curve. But
We
now,
are
because also I
creatures of
saw,
habit.
yeah, we are creatures of our habit. That's very nicely put. We're creatures of habit. I'm going to use that now. I mean, there's a saying, right? The first time you do it, it's a mistake. The second time you do it is a habit. So
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
it's more in our language, like
Yeah, and then the third time you do it, it becomes a system, right?
yeah, exactly,
That's fine.
exactly.
We
I mean,
become victims of the system. And just, plugging into what you were just sharing, Majid, I can come off as the biggest contradiction, right? I run a lifestyle brand, but I buy the least, I thrift. I am not shy of wearing second hand, some of my friends' stuff, if they feel, as long as it's, made of the material. So I largely wear cotton and natural. I'm happy to carry it off, right? Because I think fashion and living is about comfort. And the moment we just keep on accepting labels that other will continue to put, we see others will do whatever they will, right? You have to essentially figure out your path. So I'm actually a huge contradiction, and often people tell that, like, look at my face, there's zero makeup, because I don't like it, right? But I'm not saying that those who want to put should not. Please do. I would suggest you buy cruelty free and buy something that's good natural for you. But I think to each their own, but being conscious of the negative is what I say, right? So I think this is where, and to your friend also who took that commitment, I mean, I applaud it, but at the same time, he has to be able to keep it sustainable. And again, the right way would be to do is, okay, which ones are the ones who are not taking any initiative to make a change, right? Those are the ones. Because what happens is, if we are not able to bring in the collective, we'll become the lone ranger, and I've been
mm,
that in many ways, right? And I also now realize that to get in people, you have to bring in a more collaborative, softer approach. So I don't want everyone to be an Aparna, but can you take in certain things that I have incorporated in Taraja Mello and Ahana, which you can take it in your lives and in your conscious choices, and apply it individually, then to your family, then to your community, and to your business. And I think that's where the ripple effect happens, right? So I think that's what I'd like to say, that yeah, let's start with small, it's okay. Because I don't like people also who say, there are a lot of people who are like, tum akele se kya hoga, one person cannot. And that one person cannot, when 8 billion people in the world say it, it remains a cannot. You get it?
true, true,
So
true.
let's just try, is what I say. Let's just try. Let's just widen our perspective. Let's just stop being these horses who are going like this, and let's just ask questions and learn and continue to grow. Is what I'd like to say. Yeah.
Mm. No, nicely said. I mean, now because we also, I just had a look at the time, and we are also like coming to an end. My final question towards you would be about what's next for Ahana and Tora Jamelo, and how do you envision the impact of both of them evolving in the next few years?
So for us, I think after I'd met you in Germany, is we do know that we want to look at international markets where there is a high level of acceptance. At this stage, so it's about doing that smartly, and then while we galvanize the local market. So I think looking at international expansion, so we do need support. And in Japan, we're looking at Japan, Europe, with Germany. So Japan, Germany, Australia, and then I'm looking at linkages with India, if possible, because I come from there. So hopefully I can leverage on the network. So the one is international. The other is, again, something that you touched on, which is the thought leadership piece of ESG consulting, because ESG is such a misunderstood phrase at this time, and it's so integral to health of any business, that our ESG consulting arm is what I'd like to grow with. We already have a panel of subject matter experts, so taking that also beyond and reaching out to businesses in order to help them understand ESG and do that better. So I think these are the two key focuses for 2025. And of course, a non-profit arm, right, which exist, will continue to look at different communities and see how we can
Mm.
help them leverage market access and artisanship better. So this will be our focus for the coming years, and hopefully I can become profitable by end of the year. That will be great. Yeah.
No, I wish you all the very best for your goals, and also I hope you do as well. And if anyone who's listening is actually interested, the links and so on would be mentioned in the description. So go connect with Aparna. She's super fun. I've met her in person in Berlin, It was a really cool conversation that I really enjoyed also, and also learning about the whole artisan community is also nice for me to understand, because I come from Pakistan, so it's we also have a lot of artisan communities there as well. But my entire career has been in software, so for me, even for me, these things are new. So I feel it would also be new for a lot of other people who would also listen to the entire episode. But with that, I would like to say thank you so much for joining in today, Aparna. This was very insightful and a lot of fun. But is there something that you would like to say as a closing remark with the listeners?
So I'll say the thank yous later. But a shout out to anyone and everyone who's listening is we cannot do this alone. So please reach out to see how you can work together with us, right? Wherever you're operating, how you can add value to what we are doing, or how we can add value to you, because this is not something that we can strive alone on. And hence this is a call out: buy from us, work with us, and essentially let's do this together. Let's create sustainable businesses together. And Majid, thank you for this opportunity, stemming off from that conversation during the Asia Berlin Summit. And thank you for being a supporter champion. And I'd essentially like to say shukriya, right? Dhanyavad. And of course, terima kasih, because I'm dialing in from Indonesia. Yeah.
Sama sama. I learned that recently, that it's if you're talking with an Indonesian, you go sama x2, which means sama sama.
Yeah, yeah. Or you can even write Sama too, by the way. Yeah, because
Yeah.
Indonesians
Mm.
have mastered the art of creating short forms, which saves a lot of effort.
No, but thank you so much again. So, to our listeners, thank you so much for tuning into the executives this week. If you found this episode valuable, do not forget to subscribe and share it with your network. If you want to connect with Aparna or have any questions you want to ask her, her LinkedIn would be mentioned, and also the website of Toraja Mello and Hana would be mentioned in the description. So, until next time, this is Majid signing off.